So the first question, I think a lot of people are concerned about this, is when the majority of the parliament is still made up of the incumbent. How would you be able to influence the policies since they will still push the bills through with majority seats?
Well, I believe that although PAP have a majority seats, right, but sometimes they will have to really be mindful when they have the debates in Parliament. And if I really put out a very strong case to relook in the Parliament details, and I find they should be reasonable enough to reconsider and amend the proposed bill. Right? In Parliament, there are actually 3 sittings before you can pass a bill. The first sitting, they will propose what they want to do. Right? At the second sitting, we actually goes into debate and we provide inputs and certain flaws inside we will point it out. And by the third sitting, sometimes they will actually make amendment some of the details, and that is actually what will happen, right? And as long as we are not actually destructive in our way of these debates, I think it is a good point that we have made. I believe they will actually a responsible ruling party will have to do that, right?
Okay. So are there any plans to lessen the burden of young Singaporean and also to encourage them to start family since the cost of living in Singapore is quite high?
Well, first of all, do not increase the GST. You will actually create the inflation immediately. The impact is actually immediate. When you increase 2%, the cost of living may increase more than 2%, right? That's a domino effect. The second thing is assets value. That means a new house. Everyone expect to buy a HDB flat before they get married. In fact, in Singapore, when you go and propose a marriage, normally you propose, can we go and book a BTO flat? That's how they do for proposal of a marriage. But at this moment, the cost of the HDB flats are too high for the new flats, right? So the root cause is because PAP have actually changed their policies of HDB. HDB used to be very cheap. My mother, my father, let me say your grandpa, grandma, they bought a foreign flat for about 20,000. Now it costs about 400,000 for new flats. So that's how many times, no?
Yeah.
So fundamentally, HDB flats must be sold at cost price. What does it mean, cost price? I mean the cost of building the HDB plus some administration fees and all that. Because the land was acquired from Singaporeans in the past at very cheap cost, almost quite small, right? So that's the case. So I believe we have a social contract, social pact with PAP government. We give them the power to acquire the land at cheap. They are supposed to redistribute the land to Singaporeans. Right?
Yeah. Definitely. So since you have mentioned that the NCMP role was quite unethical to PAP, SPN is an unethical act of PAP, since this is kind of to discourage voters to vote for the oppositions by offering this role to them if they lost. So will you still take up the NCMP role if you're offered?
In principle, I am against the NCMP role. Basically, it's a ploy or it's a tactic used by PAP to discourage Singaporeans from voting opposition members into parliament. But having said that, right, the party or my contest is not just me alone. I have a lot of people who supported me. You have seen them, especially Uncle William. He has been true and true for these 10 days, 9 days, walking with me. He's already nearly 80 years old. So somehow, I owe it to all my supporters for this contest. So I would want to listen to them. I will respect their views before I actually make a decision on this NCMP rule.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you want to adjust the mic?
Yeah, adjust the mic. this will be better. Yeah.
Can you guys hear us better now?
All right. Okay, good. Okay, shall we carry on?
Yeah. And another question that was raised was that PPP advocates the implementation of a minimum wage. So why do you think this is better than a workfare?
A workfare is very complicated. It has administration costs. And sometimes certain freelancers actually fall through the cracks because they are not officially employed, so called, right? But a minimum wage or minimum living wage make it very clear whatever job you are doing, per hour you should be paid certain amount. You know, in Hong Kong it's the same, right?
Yeah.
So Hong Kong is $37 Hong Kong dollars, if I'm not wrong, right? So I think it is a straightforward. And a minimum wage actually protects local labor, especially the vulnerable groups who are doing manual labor, the blue collars. Why? A minimum wage should actually be applied across the board, whether you are the Singaporeans or the foreign workers, right? Because only by doing so, we will have a comparative advantage over foreign laborers, because foreign laborers will involve levy charges also to the government. So to employ foreign labor as compared to local will cost more. So unless necessary, right, they will be much cheaper to actually employ local. Yeah.
Okay. So someone asked you to address the question of whether we're actually the owners or the leasee of our HDB.
If you look at the contract that we signed with HDB when we first buy the HDB flats, it is very clearly stated we are just a tenant, we are the leasee, right? They are the landlord. Why? Because this is a very special arrangement. I believe no countries have this type of contract, because it says that basically you do not own the land where your HDB is built upon. So you are not the owner of the land. That is why you are the tenant. But you can do whatever you want with the house that you bought on this land. You can sell it and all that. So it's a very complicated thing, but in short, we do not own the land. That is why we do not have like condominium with a security guard system. We do not have fencing. We cannot prevent other people from coming in and out of the estates or the flats. That's what it means, right? There's a very fine line between that, and it actually means that HDB have all say what to do with the common areas. Although when you buy your flats, you actually pay for it. Right? Like the car parks, they will collect car park fees and all that. It doesn't belong to you, although you pay for it, pay for the construction. Right? So we are basically the tenant, the leasing.
How do you think we can change that?
I do not think we can change that easily, because that is a system that we have adopted. But we can actually use this as the reason to reduce the price of HDB flat. Because if we do not own the land, why should we pay for the land?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. And I know that a lot of people just invest all their savings in HDB just to have a shelter over their head, and that this is quite unfair if the government is just going to take back the flat or the land in like 99 years, because it will mean that each generation have to work their way up and actually get a new flat on their own.
But you look for another perspective, it is actually a very socialist type of system. It means that the government owns all the land, right? In a small country like Singapore, land is scarce. So it controls, it distributes the land. And when, for 99 years, you will take back and rebuild and redistribute the land. that is actually sound, right? But the problem is a lot of Chinese, especially the Asians, will want to buy a property and give it to their children, huh? But that cannot be done in Singapore because Singapore is too small, and if we allow that to happen, you will create a disparity of wealth, intergeneration disparity. You will create a big gap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there aren't that many comments right now, and just so you know, it's like a Q&A session. We're just having like a chit chat. So you're welcome to ask any questions. Really, it can be about policies. It can also be a really chill chat. Because it's like the last night of this whole campaigning process, and I guess it's quite nice to have a chat with our voters and just Singaporeans in general. Yeah.
Okay. I would if since there's not much of a question today, I think the IBs are sleeping today. Yesterday there are quite a couple of them. Okay. See. What is this? Okay. Okay. Oh, hardware zone. Okay. Am I? Is the 99-year lease a sound plan? It is. It is a sound plan if you consider the land size, the scarcity of the land that we have. The only problem is we are paying overpaid for these flats that's built on this piece of land, right? Well, like your grandpa or grandma, if they pay only 20,000 for a foreign flat, I don't think they wouldn't mind to actually give up the flat when it reach 99 years, right? But if you ask a person who have paid 400,000 now and give up the property for zero value, they will feel the pain because they have been missold the concept that HDB is an investment asset. It is not. It is just a home. It is not your investment. So people have to get it right, right?
Okay.
Will my daughter join politics in future? What are her views on Singapore politics? Okay, up to you.
I'm not sure about joining politics. That would be a might. It depends on what the future holds. It depends on what uni course I'm taking. It depends on other factors and whether I want to do this as a living or as a hobby, as in discussing politics with everyone else. For Singapore politics, I guess I haven't lived here long enough to really comment on anything. So I personally am more passionate about politics in Hong Kong, just because I grew up there. But certainly, I think there will still be passionate people in Singapore who are willing to defend their home, like my dad, even though this is probably his last election. But I believe that this is a legacy that will last through generations.
I've actually discussed this with my daughter. I said, if you want to get into politics, you have to equip yourself with the necessary skills and the skill set and knowledge set before you really decide to go into it. Politics is not just about glamour, right? Glamour, not just about being your 5 minutes worth on the TV, national TV. It's about lives, everybody's lives, about policy studies, about policy debates. You have to equip yourself. Well, I think you're right. It's about too young to decide on that path,
Okay, what can you do to help us in return our CPF? Well, LKY promised us at age 55 for retirement.
Well, it's a very touchy problem, huh? I've discussed this before. Now, for those who have started work before 1980s, you have been promised by the PAP government that you will get back your CPF at 55, and I think they should honor that, because if a government do not honor what they have promised, it's actually a default, a bankruptcy of integrity, right? But for those who get into the workforce thereafter, when they change the rules,
I think it's fair in the sense that, well, people keep voting in PAP as a ruling party. If you disagree with them, you should not vote for them, right? But they have the mandate. But still, I feel that they should actually honor their promise for those who have started work before the change. That's number one. Number two, whether the CPF is adequate for retirement if we actually give back all the CPF to these people at 55, I think there are two things to consider. First, the returns for CPF is just too low. I've stressed that. From 1990s onwards, it have been stagnant, basically stagnant at 2.5 for the ordinary account, right? And that is not sustainable. Number two, because of this asset enhancement, PAP allows Singaporeans to overuse their CPF for buying HDB and other private assets. And that will cause insufficiency in the funds for retirement, right? The third thing is we have this so-called CPF Life, right? Now, they force everybody to buy the CPF Life as an insurance, retirement insurance. It shouldn't be forced. If your CPF Life is so attractive, people will actually buy it. Why should you force people to buy something that a lot of people are not, doesn't seems to looks upon it as very attractive, right? So you are defying the market forces in that sense. See? Yeah.
Okay, so how can the separation of powers be applied to Singapore, and how will it affect the common people?
Okay. It affects all aspects of common people because it involves the justice and minimize the conflict of interest within the system. When, for example, you are a businessman, right? You want to tender for some jobs or some government contracts. If there's no separation of powers, most likely all these contracts will go to the BPM, family members or distant relatives of ministers and all that. That will affect your chance of getting contracts. That's number one. How could it apply to Singapore? It's very simple. Well, there are 5 powers: legislative, executive, judiciary, impeachment, and the selection process. First of all, election department should be put under the presidential office, not the prime minister office. Right? That's right. So, secondly, the PSC, the civil service selection process, should come under the elected presidency, not directly controlled by the executive. Because if it's under them, then they will put their own spouse, their own relatives and all that into important position in the civil service. It corrupts the system in that sense because there's massive conflict of interest. And third, when you come to impeachment powers, it should not come under the PMO, CPIB. It should come under the elected presidency. Why I always make this differential between the PMO and the presidential office? Because the presidential office is basically elected, sit down there, and it doesn't execute and involve in the running of the country. Is a person who got to see the system is fair. That should be the rule. So for that, CPIB, the Auditor General who audits the ministry, should become under the presidential office also. So that if you do, we can do that. We will have more or less a very good separation of powers, right? And ministers cannot anyhow put their people to be the high judge, to be the AGC, to be all those Auditor General and all that, because conflict of interest is there. Yeah, that's basically the idea, right?
Yeah, and I think again with separation of powers, there are usually the 3 main powers, right? But there's also the power of media, which is the 4th power.
Yes.
And obviously, in Singapore, like most official mainstream media are kind of controlled and
Correct.
are often biased. So that would also that in fact is like the one that affects common people the most, because it
Yes.
directly affects the information that you're receiving, and that's even more powerful than normal education.
Yes. That's what the Western democracy calls the fourth state. Fourth state of power is actually under the power of impeachment. It should be free, just like Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong, you have the blue papers, the yellow papers, and all that. Yeah, that creates a balance.
And someone asked about environmental issues and recycling day. Yes, and I do agree with all the suggestions that you've made, but I also think that it's important to just educate people from a young age about like the incentive to actually recycle, because even though it's good to have all these initiatives, but if people don't have the incentive, people don't have the motivation, then they won't really take part anyways. But that would be like a long run.
Yeah, well, for a start, the government, I would actually support the government if they implement what the payment for using plastic bag, right? That's what Hong Kong is doing. Right? That means if you want to go to supermarket, you want to use plastic bag, you have to pay for it, right? That will actually reduce the usage. Although some aunties will be very unhappy, but they will get used to it because it's for the environmental issues for our future generation, right? And use more recycled bags, just like what we did whenever we go shopping. Right?
And those bags actually carry more stuff, like they can carry
Yes.
heavier stuff without breaking easily. Yeah.
So it's a cultural mindset that determines how environmental friendly our society is. Right?
Okay. Singapore government owns about 80% of the land here. Do you think the government can afford to provide free education, free medical care, and free public transportation?
Okay. Free education, I think, it is not an issue. In fact, we have free education, so-called free education up to secondary schools. We only pay miscellaneous fees, right? Unless you are in independent school, which costs more. But when you go to tertiary, then you have to pay school fees, like the university fees and all that. My disagreement with the government is actually university fees for local is getting very high. And that should not be the case, right? For free transportation, I think I would agree for the elderly to have free transportation off-peak hours, because you want them to be active, move around, go and look for friends and talk, so that they don't get depression at home, right? I think that is what we practice in Hong Kong also, right? Not really free, but a very cheap price, $2.
Yeah, that's for elderly.
Elderlies, yeah, for the elderlies, right? So, and what else? Free what? Everything one free.
Free medical care.
I believe we have to set up a universal healthcare system. It's not free; you still pay for it, but it covers almost everything, important procedures and medicine. Look, I have studied the Japanese system. They paid about 11% of their salary to a fund, to their pension fund. But this pension fund will help them to finance their retirement, number one, their medical care, not only for themselves, but their spouse, if their spouse is not working, and their family members also, the kids, right? As well as unemployment benefits for the 6 months. I think it's half of the salary, the last drawn salary. So it's a very comprehensive system. We are paying about 37% of our into CPF, but we get none of that. We really get none of that, right? So we have to look into the system that we are having right now, right?
Can you suggest any good spots in Singapore to spot UFOs? Okay, have you actually witnessed any?
Yes.
Where?
Yes. Our old house, in Serangoon.
Oh.
Yes, yes.
Okay, why do you think it was a UFO?
Oh, because it looks like a crowd, but it was growing. That means a light was growing inside. So I find it funny. I want to take a camera and no handphone, no smartphone. So I was trying to take a picture of it, but before I can do that, it just out of sight.
Yeah.
No human technology can do that. So it's an unidentified flying object to me. Right. So where can I? Well, it depends on luck, you know. Right. Yeah. Yes. Have you heard the latest leak audio of what? Cotton Chan or Chan Chun Sing? Do you have any comment about it? Okay. He's actually right. And in every crisis, Singaporeans will be gassy and they will vote the incumbent for stability. And I believe for this COVID-19, they are using the same tactic again. It happens in 911, in 2001. Right? That is when opposition is nearly wiped out. And that is why I joined politics. There and then, I felt that I cannot just look and stand there and see all opposition being wiped out. So I stepped forward. Right? So in 2015, another crisis, not crisis, but LKY incident, he passed away. So people felt that it's a crisis. We need stability, and people are apprehensive what will happen, right? And now I think they are using the same trick, but I would say that good tricks cannot use too many times, right? Yeah, people will know it, and the ground feel is this type of tactic. The effect is actually waning. It might have still some effect, but some of the people have awakened. And the result might be surprising to PAP, right?
Okay, since you're only running for one term, how and why do you ensure the continuity of McPherson when your party is elected?
Now, if I'm so fortunate to be entrusted by the McPherson people to become the members of Parliament, representing them in Parliament, I will have a very difficult position, and I hope my family, including my wife, can be more understanding and let me continue to build on the momentum. That basically means that if I got elected and the next round, I might have to stay back and defend the turf or even expand the turf, you know, for building a democratic system for Singapore. It will be a very, very difficult decision for me, but well, never say never.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a question for me. So given that the national security law has just been officially passed in Hong Kong, what do I think the future of Hong Kong politics is?
Oh, well.
And to me, okay, it has been passed for like 7-8 days only. Yeah. And but you can already see big changes that has been happening. Like they're setting up offices, and they have used like hotels to set up offices, and they've announced a lot of other details that no one in Hong Kong really knew before the law is passed. Because to be honest, I think it was quite disrespectful to Hong Kong people that they passed a law that no one had any idea of what the details are. Like they only announced those details an hour before they passed and enforced that law. So I think it's a future of really uncertainty, but I don't think the people of Hong Kong will really give up to voice out.
Yeah.
And we also believe that China, as such, like one of the superpowers in the world, I don't think that their power base will be so easily threatened by like a simple slogan or just by people disagreeing them in within the legislative council. So I hope that there's still room for that opposition voice.
I believe you're right. Because China is a big country, it has to manage the international image facing the world. It won't actually do stupid things that will undermine his standing among the international community, right?
Okay. Okay, how come your hair is all white? Is this fashion or stress?
Well, I take it as a compliment, because it's the gene, right, of my family to have white hair at early stage. Partly also because of stress, because I think too much of policy issues. Well, it can be quite taxing. It's more taxing than walking and knocking doors, right? But that's just life. I did not want to go for what dying. Yes. I don't like that, so I just let it be.
Yeah, he likes to keep it natural because he thinks it's like a symbol of a wisdom.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Our universities are also staffed with foreign teaching staff over the local. This could be anecdotal, but it looks unhealthy. I simply agree on that. But when you come to teaching staff, maybe we do need some international perspective. Like foreign staff might bring different perspective into our system, and it's actually good if they can open up the horizon of our students. But unfortunately, because of the political system down here, most often than not, we will see that the government pressing buttons and stopping them from expressing themselves freely. I think that is more problematic, right?
Plans to help Singaporeans to support their elderly parents as well as encourage them to start families sooner.
Okay, that is the tough question. Right? It boils down to the wages, and this is one of my core thinking also. You see, we tend to differentiate the price of labor, discriminate the price of labor for the blue collar workers versus the white collar workers. We tend to think that white collar workers should earn more than the blue collar workers. But why should that be so? Right? Blue collar workers actually have a skill set that the white collar workers do not have. But why should we actually discriminate and say they are less of value? Now, if we look at Australia, for example, the plumber can earn a lot of money, as much as maybe a lecturer or simply a clerk, a financial clerk, even more than that, because they value the skill set. So we have this very strange Asian concept that discriminate hard labor, blue collar worker. We have to change that. It's only when we change that perspective, no matter which jobs that you're taking, right, you can earn a decent living to form your own family as well as taking care of your parents. Right? That is one part. The other part is, of course, the foreign labor policies, because when you allow the government to import foreign laborers to suppress their wages, of course, our wages is not going to go up. Right? I think we have to actually control that. Right?
Yeah. Someone asked, 吃饱了吗?
吃饱了，
吃饱了。
谢谢你，我们都吃饱了。
What do you think is more suitable for the Singapore political landscape? A two-party system or a multi-party system?
I believe we need a multi-party system. But in order to have that, we need a proportional representation system. just like what is happening in Hong Kong, right? It is a small space, about 7 million people, coming to 8 million. But they have a diversity of views from different spectrum. For the left or the right, you have those who represent the workers' union, both the pro-establishment as well as the PEM Democrats will have the pro-labor movement also. They have a some pet topics like the environmental topics, environmental group, they have representative. I think it's only good to have all these interests to be represented in Parliament, so that when we have policy debates, all consideration will be taken into serious thought, right?
How will you help to reduce the sufferings of the seniors in Macpherson, since they can barely afford a meal?
That is actually a very disheartening sight. Yes, I have seen them. And yes, that is the reason why I'm quite angry when Miss Tim Pei Ling actually says that she's happy to find a job for an 80-year-old man. What she needs, what we all need are empathy, not compassion in this case. You know the difference between the two?
Explain.
Well, compassion is something that you feel that you are still superior in a kind of position, and you see some less fortunate people and you have a compassion and you try to help them. But empathy is something different. Empathy is something you are able to feel their pain, the hardship, because you are looking at things from their perspective, to understand their pain and hardship, and then you will start thinking why they are in such a state. That's empathy. It's not compassion. So if you ask me how am I going to help them, I'm going to Parliament and bang the tables and say, look, we are a very rich country with Asian perspective, Asian values. And Asians will never allow their parents, their grandparents, their elderly to suffer in such a stage. So the system has actually failed us as a country, as a people with Asian values. And we have to look into it. What went wrong? Should we actually take care of all these people? Right? Universal income or whatever you call it. You know, Hong Kong have this money payment, 生果金.
Yeah.
Yeah, that means how much is that? 2005?
No, 3,000.
3,000. In Hong Kong, you pass 65 years old, they will actually give you about 3,000 Hong Kong dollars. That is about 500 Sing dollars, more than 500 Sing dollars every month to buy 生果金. It means to buy fruits, so called. But it's actually for you to relieve the stress of not having an income. If Hong Kong can do it, why not us? That is a fundamental question we have to ask. And it's very sad that when I actually read what Minister Tharman talk about, who pays and all that. Of course we have to pay. And we should be proud that we are paying. You know, when foreigners come to our land, then they start to say, hey, how come those old people are cleaning the tables and do the washing and collecting cardboards? Don't you feel ashamed of yourself, of our own country, when people are making such comment? Right? So these are fundamental ideological debates that we need to have in Parliament.
Do you agree that our NS-men should be paid market rate, bearing in mind this government is very rich, handling about $1 trillion Singapore dollars in cash and shares belonged to Singaporeans?
I believe we should be paid a fair living wage. at least a minimum living wage for even national service guys, right? They didn't choose to be there. It's an obligation for national service, but we should not exploit them after making them willingly or unwillingly to be in national service. That's rule number one. Rule number two, 朝廷不养恶兵. You pay your soldiers so low, right? When it comes to war, what do you think they will fight for you? You know, that's the fundamental things about maintaining an army, even a conscript, so to speak. Right? So yes, I do think that we should pay a fair minimum wage for even our NS boys. And in fact, by doing so, we should not be making NS boys to prepare National Day parade every year. It's a wastage of manpower. They are supposed to do training, serious training in warfare, not to prepare an event like a National Day parade. Maybe we can have once in 5 years, to have a good celebration of National Day, but not every year. I think it's a wastage. Right?
Have you read about the TOC report on the leaked PA document on the population forecast? And how do you think the PAP will handle and respond to this before cooling day?
PAP will not respond that, right? Why would they do that to make people more aware of that such a report, right? It's not going to look good on them, right? It's for us to actually propagate, to tell people there is such a thing. And do you think it is right? Right?
There's also issues about unemployment and underemployment. So how do you think your Singaporean first policy, how is that going to help?
Okay. Simple things like Vivian Balakrishnan says that there are 60,000 foreign PMAPs or foreign labourers have lost their job. I mean, so what? Do we owe them a job? Owe them a living? We are Singaporean. We are Singapore. We don't owe them any living, right? They came here because we need them, and it's a fair deal. If they lose their jobs, we are not supposed to help them to find a job again. What Singaporean first policy means that instead of open up your job station to all of them, these foreigners, we should be focusing on our local Singaporean. And that will help, I believe, right?
You always look and sound angry when debating policies. So why is that?
If you know me in person, right, I'm actually a very cheerful person.
Yeah.
I joke a lot. I'm quite chincai. I don't take things seriously. But when it comes to politics, it is the lives of Singaporeans that we are talking about. It's a serious matter, right? And we should be very serious about it. I'm sorry, I'm born that way, right?
How do you see your chances in this election? And who do you think from opposition also has a good chance to go into parliament?
I cannot really second guess how people will vote, right? But there are two conflicting data. One is from one survey company who is doing what we call a rolling straw polls, right? Which actually shows that the person they are going to win hands down. I'm not going to lose my deposit, don't worry. But it's not going to be good. Anything below 40 is not good, right? That's what they show. But the feeling that I am having on the ground, as well as as well as my campaigners who are very experienced throughout the 4 or 5 or even 6 or 7 campaigns they have gone through, they felt that the ground is actually quite good, quite warm. So I do not know. I hope it is the later rather than the statistics, but most most of my friends will believe the statistics that's presented by the straw polls, the rolling straw polls. So it can be anything. So please vote for me, right? If you want to get me into Parliament.
Okay, so in Parliament, the debates don't really exist because whenever an opposition brings up a point or a question, they get shot and talked down upon immediately. Do you think you can handle this unhealthy and demoralizing process?
Of course. If I cannot handle them, I will not want to be in that state. Right? Yeah, JBJ, you know JBJ? JBJ, one person, he can handle 10 MPs. Right? That's how he debated back in the 1980s. So it's not impossible. You must be very firm and you must know your stuff in and out. It is not just about reading a script, a prepared script by your script writers or your think tank. You must know the issue right in and out before you can really debate with anyone that comes to and challenge you. Right? I'm confident of that, especially in HDB issues, CPF issues, right? And healthcare issues.
A lot of people asked about Hong Kong, so I guess I'm going to answer that towards the end.
Okay.
So I'm not stealing your spotlight.
Okay.
Is PPP prepared to hit the ground running when you win the election from McPherson, given past history of what happened to WP in Aljunied?
Well, what does that actually means? Hit the ground running? Well, I will protect it like a jewel. I will do everything in my power to actually make things work in McPherson. Because winning an election against the PAP is actually not against the PAP, but the whole machinery of the PA, the mainstream media, and the money, the funding they have, is not easy. Once you win, you have to treasure it, right? So I believe I will have my supporters that comes in and help me on that.
What's Singapore's most pressing problem besides COVID-19 to help keep future generation competitive and relevant to the world?
It's the branding. Singapore depends on our branding. And this COVID-19 crisis actually makes our branding worse because of the decision making. The leaders are not making sound decision. They flip-flop. It doesn't instill confidence, especially in the foreigners and the investors. They will keep thinking, are you sure you know what you're doing? If you keep flip-flopping between wearing mask and not wearing mask and putting face shield or not putting face shield, right? It's quite scary to me if I'm a foreign investor. If you keep flip-flopping.
Your ideal population for Singapore since PAP has been going back and forth the 6.9 mile and 10 mile by the previous ERA planner. That was it before.
Okay. I would say at this moment, we should pause a while for the population growth. Let's solve our underemployment problem, the structural underemployment problem first, before we move forward to think whether we want to increase our population size. That's fundamental.
When you get into the parliament, what are the first 3 things that you will be doing?
Good question. The first thing I'm going to do is to build my research team, a think tank. Mostly I'm going to spend half of my MP allowance on that, to employ 2 or 3 people who are interested in policy research and to actually enhance my position in any policies, right? To give the stats, to give the perspective and all that. That's number 1. Number 2, I think I have to relook at the McPherson estate plan, because there are some places which is very badly managed, right? When the flats are actually not painted. It looks really bad from the outside. I have to look into all these issues. And of course, I have promised I will try to change all the wiring, the old wiring among the old flats. Right?
Yeah.
The third thing I'm going to do is to persuade some of the charity services. Like I've said before, first, to build a community hospital. Secondly, for the elderly counseling center to prevent more suicides from the elderly, and that is my priorities.
Yeah. What do you think of the debate on CPF drawdown age?
Oh, I've actually touched on that just now. I think if you have made a promise for those who have start working before they change the CPF stance, you have to honor your promise. Right? That's fundamental. Then what? And for the whole CPF scheme, we have to relook into what works. We cannot just force people into CPF life when most of them do not believe that it is worthwhile. Look into it to make it attractive enough for people to say, yes, I want to buy this policy. And that will be the success of CPF if we can do that.
Someone asked, who do you think is prettier? Yeah.
Oh dear.
I don't think he can answer this. Yeah, my mom's gonna kill him.
Okay, skip. Okay.
Your HDB and healthcare proposition, how are we gonna fund it?
HDB and healthcare. We have to relook on how much we give in returns to the CPF funds that we have. Right? The old methodology cannot work anymore. Well, as a comparison, I take Hong Kong because Hong Kong is the most convenient and we know more. Right? The NPF is only 5%, but with a financial literacy of the Hong Kong people, they invest their own money in different trust funds and they adjust it. They can adjust it as and when they like, right, to get more returns. So on average, right, they are getting something like at least 6%, mostly 8%, or even more than 10% per annum. And that is the way you should manage your fund and not leave it to 2.5%. Or you let people to use the CPF to invest, but you charge very high fees for making use of a CPF. I think that is actually quite rubbish, right?
If I want to join PAP, would you persuade me not to join?
Well, it's her choice. It's her choice. Of course, I will talk to her.
Yeah.
Right?
But at this moment, I don't think I will. Yeah, that's it. How will you ensure smooth hand and take over of McPherson from Team Peiling if you win?
Oh, don't worry. I have my team ready with auditors, with a consultant of setting up, very experienced consultant of setting up a town council. That is not a problem. We can pay experts to do that. I do not need to know all the stuff, I'm just human. I do not profess to know everything. Right? You just get the right people to do the right job. But
can we remove 10% service charge? Is that even a government policy? 10% service charge.
Service charge. Well, I'm not sure whether it's a government policy. Some places it's a restaurant policy actually, right? If you're not happy about it, then don't eat in that restaurant, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take away, maybe.
Yeah.
If you're voted into Parliament, what do you think are the 3 greatest challenges, and how do you want to overcome it?
The 3 greatest challenge. They will make life very difficult for me to take over the town council, as we have seen in Aljunied, right? We will tackle them one by one, right? And they will actually try to make things difficult for me to get funding for the renovation, but I will actually argue very strongly, about the safety of the residents. We are actually playing politics with the lives of the residents of Singaporeans, and of course, if I ever wins, the biggest challenge is actually when a lot of people comes to me, I have to make my judgment who to trust and who not to trust, and that is my skill set, right?
What do you propose to make HDB more affordable?
I've always say that cost plus pricing for the new HDB flats, cost plus pricing, and dealing it from the market prices. That's the only way, right?
And I don't think the government is trying to earn like large sums of money from HDB, since the whole building of it is still from the taxpayers' money. And even though they're trying to like cover costs and everything, that's fine. But to being overly pricing it, that would kind of be unfair, because it's not a privately owned property.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
It's really hard for the opposition to challenge PAP's dominance in Singapore. So what keeps you going and not giving up after all these years?
It's always in the mind. No matter what environment, situation that we face, right? You need to have a very strong mind, a very stubborn mind to make it going, right? If not, most people will have actually dropped out long time ago.
Okay. What's your view on Singapore foreign policy, especially with China?
Well, as I was saying, foreign policies, right?
Yeah, and because this is in reference to the how Singapore has dealt with closing the borders in the early stage of COVID-19.
We will try to be friends with all people in the world. But when it comes to the safety of our own citizens, just do it. We don't really get ourselves beholden to any big powers. Because as a government, you are the Singapore government, you are not a so-called a state of the United States or a state or province of China, So we have to maintain that perspective. Singaporeans' interests always come first, right?
Yeah.
But having said that, do not go and agitate any of the big giants, right? Because we survive in between the cracks.
What do you think is the right amount for minimum wage?
Well, for a start, we look at what McDonald's is giving. I think McDonald's is giving $6, right? $6 is about what? 6 times 5 is about 30, slightly more than that. Yeah.
Yes, 36, less than that, but
Yeah, less than that.
I think it can be a reasonable start.
Yeah.
But if McDonald's actually give out higher wages in Australia, like they give out 10 Australian dollars per hour. So why is that the case when they're like, they're franchises, but why do they pay more in Australia and not in Singapore?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe for a start, I think a reasonable range would be about $7 to $8 per hour.
Yeah.
Right. And that will comes to when you work 8 hours per day, you earn about what? $60 roughly, $60 per day for 20 days. How much will it? 1,200.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable,
Okay.
right?
PAP is going to raise GST to 9%. Instead of raising GST, what spending do you think is wasteful and should be cut so that the budget remains fiscally responsible?
The first budget that I'm going to look into is actually the spending on a T5. Like Kobuma have a cheek to say that, we do not know how much he's going to spend after having a 10 billion projected spending. I think that's irresponsible. Every budget, why it's called a budget, is called a plan. If you do not have a plan, you don't even know a budget, then why you go into it? right? That's irresponsible. So for big ticket items, long-term infrastructure spending, I would suggest for the Parliament to set up a special committee to look into the spending. This is how Hong Kong actually did, right? All the big ticket items will have to go through the budgetary committee, something like that,
Yeah.
right? So in order to control the spending of the government, to balance it, I think this is a necessary step that we have to reform the Parliament itself.
Yep. So Ho Chin's salary and how much our reserve have left, be a state secret or should public have the right to know?
Well, we will only know when we become the government, right? I don't think under current situation they are going to review it. But it's a moral hazard. How can you not reveal the salary of a government-owned entity, right?
Do you guys not have like an annual report of how much reserve you've used or how much is left?
They do have, but they do not give you the full picture.
Oh.
They will say a range, more than 200 billion, 300 billion and all that. But a rough estimate is we have actually more than 1 trillion reserve.
I'll make a comment that if they were not given a mandate, foreign investors will not invest in Singapore or lack confidence in Singapore. What is your comment?
Are you kidding? Foreign investor only lacks confidence when you flip-flop. Not because you get less seat. Because as far as you get, well, more than half the seats, you can pass all the bills, right? So why could there will be stability? Unless you are saying that there's a hung parliament, then as an investor, I will be thinking twice before I come in. But as long as the PAP have more than half of the seats, it doesn't make a diff to the investors.
For me, PM Lee and Ho Chin combo is a conflict of interest. There are just too much power in hands of a small group of people. What do you think? And can we change that?
Yes, precisely. I have spoken about this in 2014 when I asked the Prime Minister to step down because of two reasons. One is a SICA. SICA is actually a total sold out of our jobs in return for Temasek and GIC and the big banks in Singapore to invest in India financial sector. That is basically what it is all about, right? And the second reason is the massive conflict of interest between him and his wife, right? No matter how you try to explain it away, it is visually basically a massive conflict of interest. And it creates a situation where other ministers also have a similar conflict of interest, and it's quite messy right now.
Who do you think is the worst performing minister and why?
Well, none other than what? Josephine Teo, right? They messed up the dormitory thing. The second one, on par, is actually Gan Kim Yong, right? I think these two.
Sure.
Yeah, they share, right?
Cotton Chan?
Yeah.
No.
No, he just have a slip of tongue.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's important for him to watch his words.
Yes.
Because when at the start of COVID, there was this panic buying in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And he kind of made fun of it and said it was what monkey see, monkey do. And after that, he's had a mouth slip and talked about how cotton comes from sheep. And he has officially become a joke in Hong Kong. Just saying.
Okay.
So be mindful of your words and don't make fun of other people because when you do something embarrassing, other people are going to laugh at you.
Okay, all right. See.
Sharima, you never pick my questions. Okay, I'm going to answer some.
Okay.
I think you asked whether I'm going to study uni in Hong Kong or Singapore. And I honestly still don't know yet.
Yes.
I'm I still have a year and a bit to, I still have a year to choose my uni, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think someone also asked whether it's hard to find jobs in Hong Kong, and yes, I think it is, because it's such a competitive world. Having like a university degree doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's kind of like this minimum requirement that you need a university degree to get like not even a really highly paid job.
But I think she shouldn't have any problem, but because she's a 牙尖嘴利, can talk very well. Hong Kongers like people who can talk and can express themselves. Huh?
For COVID-19, what do you think are the ways to take Singapore out of this pandemic, and especially the declining economy?
Throwing money. Because without throwing money, we will be in a spiral of a deflation. And when we have that, the engine of the economy will die, and we will be devastated.
Yeah. Should parliamentary debate be broadcast to the audience on the TV channels? Do other countries practice doing that?
Hong Kong do that?
Yeah, Hong Kong does that, and in fact, a lot of ministers themselves, they kind of like just crop out the video of what they've said and put it on the channel as part of campaigning and part of their track record of what they've contributed.
And not only that, in Hong Kong, the radio station, the TV station will actually invite the ministers as well as the opposition, so-called the Democrats, to their show, and they will have a live debate straight on. And that's a healthy way of looking at providing information to the Hong Kongers, the stakeholders, of what they are actually having.
Yeah, it's about the transparency.
Yes.
Because people always say when you're like opposition, it's just because you don't understand what the government think, and how are we going to understand if they're not invited to like speak to the public and actually have like a real Q&A sessions that not scripted.
Yep. Okay.
Will you push for SCRS for MacPherson old flats?
Now, about this en bloc, SCR is actually en bloc. I believe all flats in Singapore have to go through SUS. Why? Because the concrete that we use, the material that we use, cannot last 99 years. By 70 years, in fact, before reaching 70 years, a lot of places have this powering concrete already. You know, it is unsafe, very unsafe if we continue that position. But PAP says that they maintain 4% of SUS. So I disagree with that. Now, the problem is, if we want to actually rebuild the flats in MacPherson, for example, but there is a challenge not to actually destroy the community. So that is something that we have to consider, how to go about it. I'm not expert, but I'm pointing out the key parameters or the key concerns of when you are doing a SUS, right?
Okay, I think last question?
Last question.
Okay. What is your take for the current CPF legislation?
Well, I have yet to actually go into details of studying it because of all this campaigning, right? I will come to it after the election. Whether I'm elected or not, that's beside the point. I'm still interested to know exactly what they are trying to do. Right? As I said, CPF Life should not be compulsory. It must be made very attractive for most of the Singaporeans to buy into it. Right?
Someone also said, I think we need to introduce basic politics system lessons in the education curriculum. So that's, yeah.
I agree with that. Not only politics, I believe that for our country, we must actually enhance financial management course from young, right? Because I find that most Singaporeans are over dependent on the government to take care of their CPF money. They must learn how to invest, not speculate, but invest wisely into their funds, right?
Okay, and I think that's most questions. People asked whether I'm gonna sing a Canto song again. Well, I think we're still gonna go live after like this whole election, after results come out.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna do that regardless of what. But if he wins, then I'll sing. So yeah. And Shireen is a common Bangladesh name.
Shireen is not a Bangladesh name, okay? It's an Iranian name.
It is?
Yes, it is an Iranian name. It's not a Bangladesh name. Because we are not a Christian, so we cannot use a Christian name. Right? that's the reason why you end up with this name. Right? Yep.
Okay, I think that's about it for tonight.
Right.
Hope you guys have a good night, good evening. Have a great cooling day tomorrow.
Yes.
And have a great public holiday on Friday. And remember to vote for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.